What if a Spider-Man comic came to life on your PS2? That's exactly what Ultimate Spider-Man did back in 2005. But does it still hold up today? I'm Joe, an ex-gaming industry pro, and today we're swinging through New York and smashing things up in the Ultimate Spider-Man game. It's been nearly 2 decades since its release. Let's see if it's still worth playing. Released in 2005, Ultimate Spider-Man was developed by Treyarch and based on the Ultimate Spider-Man comics by Brian Michael Bendis. What really makes this game stand out is the comic book art style and the ability to play as both Spider-Man and Venom, giving you 2 very different gameplay experiences. But this game is definitely a roller coaster. You'll be loving the web swinging and the cameos, and then suddenly get hit with frustrating chase sequences and some really unbalanced boss fights. But we'll get into that in more detail later on. Now, this is an action-adventure game in every sense. Spider-Man's gameplay is fast and fluid. Think combos, dodging, and quick reflexes. Meanwhile, Venom feels like a tank. He's raw power, smashing through enemies and devouring civilians to heal. Both playstyles complement each other nicely, giving the game solid variety. The story follows Peter Parker in the Ultimate Marvel universe, focusing on the symbiote suit that turns Eddie Brock into Venom. Now, here's the thing, if you haven't read the comics, the plot can feel all over the place. Sure, you'll understand that Peter and Eddie's fathers worked on Venom, but beyond that, the narrative gets confusing. But hey, the cameos are cool, and we'll get to those cameos later on when we discuss the narrative. But trust me, the universe feels super faithful even if the story doesn't always make sense. When I first jumped into Ultimate Spider-Man, I was instantly impressed by the comic book visuals. Even in 2024, the art style still looks awesome. The way they use comic panels for cutscenes is a nice touch that really fits the vibe. The human characters look kind of monstrous, but we'll let that slide. Now, what really blew me away was the movement mechanics, especially considering this is a PS2 game. You moved with all the exaggerated swagger of it. What I meant was the web swinging feels smooth, fast, and super satisfying. And Venom's movement is just as fun. You can spend a decent amount of time just travelling through the city and it never gets old. But while the movement is great, the combat doesn't quite live up to it. As Spider-Man, you've got basic combos, dodging, and webbing up enemies. It's fun at first, but it gets repetitive fast. However, Venom's combat is a different story. You're consuming people to heal, throwing cars at enemies, and generally just running around wreaking havoc. It's a blast. But here's where the game starts to lose momentum. The story mode's gameplay can get frustrating. Some of the boss fights are really unbalanced, and you'll probably find yourself redoing them several times. That's if you can even get to the fights, because wow, there are way too many chase sequences. And the camera, yeah, it struggles sometimes, which can lead to some funny but obnoxious glitches. This is the part in the video where I show a compilation of my trauma and ask for a subscribe in return. But you know what? Subscribe if you want to. Not because you pity me. I mean, I play video games. And let's be real, the web swinging alone makes this game worth revisiting. Swinging through the city as Spider-Man feels incredible, and when you switch to Venom, it's a whole new vibe. The variety between the two keeps things fresh, even when some of the missions start feeling repetitive. Outside of the main missions, there's plenty to do around the city. Races, fighting groups of enemies, collecting tokens. These challenges unlock a ton of extras. Comic covers, character models, and even new costumes for Spider-Man. But here's the catch, you can't access the new costumes until after you finish the game. Same goes for Venom in free roam. You'll have to beat the game first to play as him. Luckily, the main story only takes around 4 hours, so it's not too much of a wait. The racing challenges weren't the best, but gave you a solid excuse to test out the impressive movement mechanics, while the combat tours were all about just beating up waves of enemies, and the city is always in need of help. And the game actually makes you you complete some of these side activities to progress in the story. I personally enjoyed the random missions, like stopping a speeding car. It adds a fun bit of variety. But again, you'll be going from enjoying the open world 1 minute to dreading another chase sequence the next. The contrast is real. Overall though, I'd say it's more enjoyable than frustrating. And maybe I was just not in the mood to repeat a chase sequence 30 times when I filmed this. Visually, Ultimate Spider-Man is still a treat. The comic book inspired visuals hold up surprisingly well. The use of animated comic panels during the story gives it that authentic comic book vibe. For a PS2 game, it looks fresh, though some of the character models are a little off, as I mentioned earlier. The voice acting was pretty good. Peter Parker's attitude is spot on.
Jump and then jump again. Sure, it breaks the laws of physics, but so do most things I do.
And Venom's growls are perfectly menacing. The soundtrack isn't that memorable, but the overall sounds of the world really help immerse you in. What isn't immersive though is the narrative. Like I said earlier, the story is all over the place. There are some fantastic cameos from characters like Wolverine and Human Torch, but sometimes they just throw in a villain without explaining their plot or even who they are. One thing's for sure, everyone in the story loves making phone calls. Seriously, it feels like every other scene has someone pulling out a phone. And guess what? It's always a Nokia. Oh, and just when I thought I was overthinking it, well, at that point I had to wonder, was this game secretly sponsored by Nokia? Like, I wouldn't be surprised if the Venom suit itself was powered by Nokia's unbreakable battery life. I went a bit off topic there. Anyways, there are genuinely bits of story that feel like it picked up a few weeks later, but didn't bother informing you, the gamer. It feels like some content might have been cut, or the story was meant for comic readers who already know what's going on. There's a very specific scene where this fella, Beetle, who wasn't even introduced, takes a vial of Sandman, phrasing, and then it's never brought up again. Sandman's not even in the game. And hey, if you're a comic expert, let me know in the comments. Am I missing something here, or is the story as scattered as it feels? So, is Ultimate Spider-Man still worth playing in 2024? I'd say yeah, despite the flaws. The web swinging mechanics are still amazing, the comic book visuals hold up, and playing as Venom is a ton of fun. Just be ready for some frustrating boss battles, too many chase sequences, and a story that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But if you're a Marvel fan or a comic book fan, the cameos and overall vibe still make it a fun experience.
18 and older.
What does that mean?
It means I need you to back off.
For me, Ultimate Spider-Man isn't perfect, but it's worth swinging back to. If you enjoyed this review and want to see more games from your childhood, hit that like button and subscribe. Until next time, have a good morning, afternoon, evening, whenever you are, wherever you are, and see you next time for some absolute chaos.
I'm so excited!